Hey everybody, it is Drake, and Happy New Year! I hope everybody had a great 2024. I know mine was awesome. My family and I went on 2 vacations this year. We went to Maui in May, and then we went to Disneyland in November. Those were both so much fun. Another thing I did in 2024 was watch 50 more movies. And today we are going to be ranking them from worst to best. A couple things to keep in mind as we rank these movies is that these are my own opinions. Of course, I am not an actual critic. I'm going to have some controversial picks, probably, compared to what you might think is the best movie of the year or what the worst movie of the year is. And just know that, at the end of the day, it's just my opinion. You don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with it, but that's okay. There's a couple movies I didn't get to see this year. I'm going to throw them up on the screen right now. I was either just too busy or uninterested in seeing them, but they were very well regarded in reviews and are going to be on a lot of people's ranked 2024. And I just figured I'd show them to you real quick. That way you're not anticipating it and wondering, why is this missing? It's because I didn't watch it. Here's how the format's gonna go. I'm gonna be floating on a box in the left-hand side. On the right side of the screen, you will find the movie poster with the title in it, and in the middle will be the rank number and the star rating, which is out of 5, like they do on Letterboxd. Since I don't want this video to take forever, what I'm gonna be doing is giving every movie a 1-sentence review up until the top 5, and then we'll start breaking it down, because those are the movies that I really want to talk about. Alright, let's get started! This movie was purely made to profit off of Steamboat Willie, which has now entered the public domain, and no effort was put into it. I know I watched this movie with my son, but I don't remember watching it. You know what I mean? For a kid's movie to be as passive as Nick Carraway and The Great Gatsby, it's not entertaining. It has its moments, but the movie switches gears like 5 times and it's just inconsistent. The most unnecessary sequel of the year that backpedals so hard, it's like the studio was saying, thanks for the Oscar for Joker 1, but f*** you for liking that movie. This is one of those rare instances where the sequel is actually better than the original, and while it still isn't that good of a movie, it's still great to see a director take the feedback from the first one and apply it to his next one. Great soundtrack, but I only wanted to watch the Super Minions in this one. I've never been a big fan of the Venom films, but I just kinda wish they ended it off on a higher note for them. Crazy original in its style and cinematography, but it just had so many horror cliches and it was hard for me to connect to the characters. The chemistry between the leads was nice, but the movie tries so hard to mimic its 80s counterparts with a horror twist that it just throws the story kinda out the window. 1/3 of this movie is trippy drug sequences that don't make sense until the last third, but I had a laugh. I love M. Night Shyamalan, but the movie is just lazy to me in the sense that the main character just gets insanely lucky up until the end of the movie. What should have been a great satirical comedy with a star-studded cast ends up just being a boring mess of a rom-com that doesn't quite hit the point that it wants to make. I know this movie was based on a true story and it's meant to honor its victims, but I feel like it kept spending too much time with its victims and cutting away from the more engaging and intense plotline of the dating show. The story was fine, but the movie really shines in the fun that they had making these action sequences. It's a fun movie, but the real highlight for me was that it needle dropped my morning alarm song. This felt like a very classic Tim Burton movie to me. I just wish that the antagonist didn't feel like a side plot. For me, what stops this movie from being a great ending to an amazing horror trilogy is that the mystery of this movie wasn't really a mystery. It has fun action and you can tell that they tried their best. I just feel like they're never gonna top what they did with Kung Fu Panda 2. Very wholesome movie, but extremely fast-paced as well. The plot feels very similar to the first movie, obviously with changes of the new characters, but it is a welcome sequel that justifies its existence. A very creative horror that can be just a little too much of a slow burn for me, but if you're a fan of Friday the 13th, you will appreciate this movie. It's one of the better Disney sequels, but the songs just don't slap as hard as the first. An interesting approach to a rom-com that really shows the range that Glen Powell has. They took what they did in the first one, and then they just said,
"This is where the fun begins."
A funny and wholesome movie about spending the time with the people that we love because we're not going to spend it with them forever. The story's good, don't get me wrong, but the monster design is
absolutely insane.
A prequel sequel that wasn't really necessary, but it adds to the franchise in a way that fans and new watchers are just going to enjoy. I don't know if I was more tense about the characters in peril or if the cat was going to make it to the end of the movie. This movie feels like a weird combo between David Lynch and Steven Chbosky in all the best ways. The leads in this movie do an amazing job of balancing the silliness with the real personal moments, and I love it. Now don't get me wrong, the movie had a great animation team and a stellar cast, but this really needed a Linkin Park song to get the extra star. As a fan of this show, on God, this movie burns. Straight Steezen. Red vs. Blue, among other projects made by Rooster Teeth, were what initially started me on my path to wanting to be a creative. And this being their last production, I couldn't help but love what they did. I've given up on the MCU, but I can't deny how good this movie is.
I forgot to film the number 15, and I'm in the middle of editing, so sorry for the brief improperness. If there's a message you have to take away from this movie, I hope that it's what does a stunt person have to do to earn an Oscar?
The cinematography and the atmosphere of this movie made me check every single corner in the frame like it was a J-horror film, and Nick freaking Cage crushes it. This film carries the spirit of the first one, and I guarantee you it will be shown in every substitute science class all over America. Tennis hasn't been this emotionally manipulative since the Queen gave death threats to Kit Harington in 7 Days of Hell. Before this movie, I never really thought of wartime photographers, but as I'm looking at photos now, I can only think, how could they take this shot? I've never sat down to watch a full episode of Saturday Night Live, but I hope every production is exactly like how it was in this movie. I wouldn't say I'm a fan of the Alien franchise, but this movie comes the closest to replicating the feeling of the first film, and it is an instant classic. Probably the best Broadway to Hollywood adaptation we are ever going to get. You have to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but this movie is a breath of fresh air in the found footage horror genre. This movie had great characters with a thrilling narrative that I couldn't help but bawl towards the end of the movie. And with that, we have made it to the top 5 movies of the year. That was really quick for you, but that probably took me an hour and 15 minutes to film all those, so hope it was worth it. Now that we're in the top 5, we're going to take our time, we're going to break down the movie, and I'm going to tell you exactly why I love them. At number 5, we have Monkey Man. This movie's just crazy. They took the action of a John Wick movie and gave it a proper story that takes its time with its characters and world building. This movie puts its characters first, but still delivers some of the craziest action I have seen in a long time. And the fact that Dave Patel, who stars in this movie as Monkey Man, also directed this whole thing is just inspiring. This movie also does a great job of balancing different tones. One minute you're laughing at either a funny quip or some slapstick humor, and then you're devastated at watching what this movie is really about, and then you're hyped up again watching him train to kick people's asses to overthrow the hierarchy. It's just a great movie that you have to see to believe. In a year filled with good and bad sequels, I was absolutely thrilled to see that Dune Part 2 not only delivered, but improved upon the first part. I understand that Part 1 had to set up the world of Dune, but a lot more happens this movie, and I was a lot more engaged. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the cinematography and the visual effects because we all know that that's going to be at the Oscars this year. But what really shined for me in this movie was the performances. The entire cast did a spectacular job of captivating me, and by the end of the 3-hour runtime, I didn't want to stop watching. I wanted it to keep going. And before this movie, Timothée Chalamet, he was fine to me. My favorite performance of his was in The French Dispatch, but he really stepped it up in this movie. I haven't watched Part 1 and 2 back to back yet, but I'm sure they're going to blend seamlessly into a blockbuster of the ages. Since becoming a dad, I've watched a lot of kid/family movies, and there's a lot of okay ones, but not a lot of ones that I say are absolutely amazing, must-watch 5 stars. But I am so absolutely blown away with DreamWorks for what they did with The Wild Robot. This movie is animated just stunningly. You could pause any frame of this movie and examine it and detail it and make it your background or print it on a canvas. It just looks incredible. I really hope they continue to animate almost every movie like this because it's just incredible to look at every single time. The story's hilarious, and it's not afraid to shy away from the true nature of nature. It has a lot of dark humor in it, which I enjoy, but it's also still a kid's movie, and your kids are gonna love it just as much as you do. I laughed, I cried, and it's definitely becoming one of our new favorite movies for family movie night. The number 2 slot goes to the last movie I watched this year, and is made by a director who, in my opinion, never misses. In Nosferatu, Robert Eggers takes his unique style that he's been building over the last 8 or so years and fine-tunes it to deliver one of the best modern adaptations of an iconic horror movie. Of course, it's a dark horror movie that had my anxiety peaking at times, but this movie really also shines as a dramatic tragedy that really hits every beat, and the actors nailed every single one of their performances, giving it 110%. It felt like watching a live Shakespeare play right in front of you, and I couldn't look away even when I wanted to. I was fully captivated throughout the entire thing. Every actor had their moment to shine, and I really hope that there are some nominations for them moving forward. Everything about this movie, from the cinematography and the production design to the story and the editing, has a purpose. Not a moment or a frame was wasted, and it's just absolutely incredible. And now for the number 1 movie of the year, in my personal opinion. This movie caught me by surprise in 2 ways that I'm going to explain to you first before I reveal what it is. One being, I am very up to date on movies coming out and when they're getting their Blu-ray releases, theater releases, etc. Almost no movie flies under the radar for me. And somehow this one did. I didn't realize it was a thing until after it had released on digital, and it had a theater run. I just somehow didn't know about the movie. Another way it caught me by surprise is this is the first movie to hit a number 1 spot for me that's a documentary. Now, I've watched a lot of documentaries and I like them. I just prefer fiction for movies. I've never had a documentary land even in my top 10 of anything, but now here it is taking the number 1 slot. I had such a fun experience with this movie that the day after me and my family watched it, we had to go out and get it on Blu-ray. Piece by Piece is the number 1 movie for me for 2024. Piece by Piece is a documentary about Pharrell Williams, who is probably the greatest music producer of the past decade. Before watching this movie, I didn't really know the name or how big of a reach he had in the music industry. While watching this movie, I got so excited reliving all the songs from my youth, just being presented in front of me with a completely new lens, and it was just incredible. Now, another thing that sets this documentary aside from others is that they decided to animate the entire thing in Lego, and of course that could be used as a gimmick, and they even joke about it a little bit at the start of the movie, but then Pharrell explains to you why he wants it to be done in Lego, and you see the vision, and it adds such a unique watching experience. Now, I know this is going to be a controversial pick because there were so many more cinematic movies this year, like Nosferatu and Dune and The Wild Robot, and they're all going to get the awards. But the experience I had watching this movie with my family was what made it number 1. We were laughing uncontrollably at all the on-screen gags and jokes. We were sad when the movie took its dark moments seriously and didn't shy away from it. We were engaged throughout the entire movie, including my 7-year-old son, who wouldn't have recognized any of the music in it, and he only recognized Minions and Snoop Dogg. It was just such an experience and such a heartfelt story that we couldn't help but fall in love with it. And that's why I picked it for my number 1 movie of 2024. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I enjoy ranking these movies and watching all these movies and just being able to share my thoughts with you guys, but I want to hear back from you now. What did you agree with on this list? What did you disagree with? What's your number 1 movie of the year? Let me know in the comments, whether if it's on this YouTube video or on any of the social media I post this on. I love talking movies, so let's talk movies. I'll see you guys next year after another 50 movies. See you guys. Happy New Year.